Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. Welcome to our webinar, Accelerating FedRAMP ATO on AWS. Tips from the trenches. My name is Indy, and I'm a cloud solution specialist with stackArmor, and I will be conducting this exciting webinar today. As you can see, we have an exciting panel of speakers to talk to you about pursuing FedRAMP accreditations and obtaining an ATO on AWS. This webinar is especially useful for commercial companies looking to provide their cloud-based software or applications to government clients. Let me introduce you to our experts. First up, we have Mr. Dan Kasun. He is a technology industry veteran with over 20 years of experience working with organizations of all sizes. He leads the ISV partner channel for worldwide public sector at AWS. Our next panelist is GP. GP is the principal at stackArmor, and he has successfully led multiple FISMA, FedRAMP, and DFARS compliance projects on AWS for US federal agencies and commercial clients. Finally, we have the pleasure of having John Keese. John is an experienced cloud security and compliance technology leader, having successfully worked on multiple FedRAMP ATO programs since 2012. Over to the next slide, please. Now, just before we get started, some logistics. Raise your hand, please raise your hand to indicate that you need something from the host. We will answer your questions toward the end of the webinar. Please feel free to use the Zoom webinar console to submit your questions online. Our moderator, Amreen, will read those out and one of the speakers will respond. Also, towards the end, you will have the ability to participate and vote in the poll. We would truly appreciate your responses. Now, without much ado, I would like to invite GP to go ahead and kickstart the webinar.
Thank you, Indy, for that introduction. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. This is GP with stackArmor. It gives me great pleasure to invite Dan Kasun from Amazon Web Services to talk to you about an exciting program called ATO on AWS. Dan is a close friend and has been, as Indy indicated, an industry veteran who helps organizations gain and achieve compliant status on the AWS cloud service. Dan, please take it away from here.
Thank you, GP, and thanks everybody for joining the call today. I want to set the stage in this first part of the discussion, first by just discussing the needs and challenges around compliance, and specific to FedRAMP, and then we'll lead into a little bit about what AWS is doing and how we can help our customers, or trying to help our customers, along with our partners like stackArmor. GP, if you just go to the next slide. I've been at AWS for about 5 years now, and in the public sector channel for much longer than that. And one of the things that I noted over the last 5 years, as I was working with solution providers in this space, is that there's an increasing need for the attainment of accreditation and/or authorizations for regulated markets and regulated use of solutions. 10 years ago, most solutions were running inside of an organization's boundaries. Nowadays, federal government, other agencies are all looking to third-party solutions that are running outside. And to that end, those solutions have to meet some certain standards in order for those agencies or entities to feel comfortable working with them. And my first indication is that, oh gosh, what a challenge that is, and a burden for us. But the more we think about it, and those of us who rely on these industries as citizens or as customers, really should appreciate the fact that they exist. And the fact that that globally, and here you can see the different standards throughout the globe, and there are many more that here are there. Otherwise, if I'm a government agency using a solution out there, I have no idea if it's running under somebody's desk, if it's in a secured data center or not. So the fact that we have standards and we have processes that are consistent and visible and fairly transparent to determine whether those environments meet the standards that we need is actually a really good thing. And I think the fact that so many people are on the call today is reflective of that. And what's also nice about it is there's a lot of consistency. FedRAMP is based on the FISMA models, and if you look at across the world, whether it's IRAP or others in other nations, you'll find that the common baseline is fairly consistent. You're securing a data center, securing infrastructure, securing networking and data. It's actually a well-known thing, and doing it right is known. And the fact that there is this consistency is great, because we know if we do it right for one thing, we'll probably be able to get it right for many others. In this case, we're talking about FedRAMP, and FedRAMP is actually a great place to start, because it is a very mature framework, and the processes for getting through FedRAMP are fairly well known and fairly transparent. And that's a good thing, because some others, getting through authorization or getting an accreditation is not quite as clear and determinate. And FedRAMP made tremendous progress over the last several years in getting through the process, both helping organizations determine how to get there and then actually getting through the process itself too. And the ecosystem of solutions out there that help customers meet those compliance requirements, whether it's organizations that provide consulting, advisory, or audit, or the tools used to get there, has gotten fairly rich. So the good news is we're actually making progress on all these, and for those organizations that are looking to get authorization, accreditation in some way, like FedRAMP, it's a much better place than even just a couple of years ago. However, if you go to the next slide, GP, there are still challenges, and it's still not super straightforward in most cases, not quick, and certainly not inexpensive in many cases. So here's some averages that I put up here that we've seen in our experience over the last 5 years or so. Average time to FedRAMP ATO, from the time that you say, hey, we want FedRAMP, to the time that you actually get your authorization, from 18 to 24 months. And that's a combination of all the time it takes to prepare and get ready to even start submission to FedRAMP, to the process that actually gets through once it goes to the PMO and gets accepted and authorized. For the other compliance frameworks out there, like DoD, IL5, IL4, 24 to 36 months, IRS 1075 DFARS, high trust, CGIS, it's all fairly consistent out there, because there's a lot of things that go into it. If you go to the next slide, GP, and that's kind of the question, is why is this so hard? And the fact is because there's a lot to it, no matter what you're doing. It's not just making sure that you have firewalls on and you're encrypting your data, or you're doing incident response or intrusion detection. It starts at the ground level, literally, it's physical level. If you think about something like FedRAMP, it starts with the physical environmental security. Is your building secure? Do you have controlled access? Are you managing your infrastructure properly? Do you have fire suppression? Do you have backup power? All these things that you have to think about that go up the chain in terms of level of responsibility that you are responsible for if you're going to commit to run something on behalf of a government agency as a SaaS provider or something too. So it includes everything that most of us know about computer security, cybersecurity, and protection, but also much more about that in terms of data center and infrastructure. And then on top of that too, the processes of generating the reports, doing the auditing, and then making sure that it's in a format that's acceptable to whatever entity you're working with. It's a lot of work. And one of the things that we can do, or this is where AWS or other cloud providers come in, is we take some of that work away, and that's the value of using the cloud. And GP, if you go to the next slide. This is really the first thing, and why would I consider cloud versus just running my own data center? Well, the very first thing is when you're going to pursue an authorization, you want to reduce the amount of work that you yourself have to do. And using a cloud provider like AWS takes a significant amount of work off of your hands. So like I mentioned before, a good number of those controls for FedRAMP are infrastructure, networking, building, et cetera, too. Well, most of that, or much of that, AWS takes responsibility for. Again, everything's going to run in our regions, in our availability zones and data centers. So things like the physical security and the networking and the fire suppression and the backup power and all that, you don't have to worry about. And we manage security of everything up through the hypervisor. And that's a good thing because it takes it all off your plate. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Whereas if you were running your own, you do have to worry about it. That said, I get the question quite a lot. Well, hey, if we run in AWS, that means that we're FedRAMP compliant too? And the answer is no. You get to use and leverage everything that AWS has done up to the hypervisor, but you still have some responsibility yourself. That's why you talk about this shared responsibility model, shared security responsibility model. You're still responsible for managing your operating system, patches, et cetera, your application. Really, everything from the hypervisor up is going to be your responsibility. But between the two of us, that's how we have the whole solution protected, secured, and that's where we go through the authorization together. Go to the next slide, GP. So again, AWS takes a significant amount of responsibility. The customer takes some responsibility too, and together we're authorized. And that's great because again, a lot of the hard things are taken off out of your hands. You go to the next slide though, GP. Now, that said, the part that and the question might be, well, shoot, it still takes a while to get FedRAMP on, even on the cloud. Why is that? Well, the fact is that there's still a lot of work to be done. AWS, yes, if you run on the cloud, you're going to get a lot of benefit, but there's still work you need to do, whether it's, again, the operations, the applications, managing your network security, doing your network boundaries, firewalls, doing your auditing, all too. So that came up, and again, I've been seeing this for the last 5 years or so, and finally, what can we do beyond just providing the infrastructure? How can we help our customers meet these things too? And if you go to the next slide, GP, and this is where the concept of ATO on AWS came into hand. We looked at the things that organizations are doing out there and that our partners are doing, the best practices, the tools that they're using, and we put everything together in I'll say a package of sorts that we use to help people get through authorization challenges or overcome or meet an audit or hit an authorization like FedRAMP. So the idea is ATO AWS was launched to help organizations get through those challenges above the hypervisor more quickly and less expensively so they could get to market faster. And we launched this just over a year ago, and we launched with 24 partners together, because this isn't just an AWS thing. AWS doesn't come in and do the work for you or anything too. What we've done is we've built out a community of partners that all work together to provide the solutions that the customers need to get this done, including organizations like stackArmor. So if you go to the next slide, GP. So what do we do as part of ATO and AWS? It's really three main things. One, we start out by helping and educate and provide guidance about compliance programs. So the first thing is really helping our customers understand, what do you need with FedRAMP? What do you have to do? What should you be thinking about? So we put a lot of content online, do events and sessions like this one right here, et cetera. The second thing is we help our customers build solutions that meet compliance requirements. So we have best practices, DevOps processes, and tools that we recommend and provide to our customers to help them get their infrastructure correct and help them to get their DevOps practices correct so that they can run in a compliant environment. And then after that, help with the process of actually chaining or achieving that authorization. So this typically would mean connecting our customers with the partners and the other organizations who know how to put together the compliance documentation and go through a submission and make it as quickly as possible. So go to the next slide, GP. So the things that we include as part of ATO and AWS: training, going out and working with our customers. If someone reaches out to us and says, can you help us understand how FedRAMP applies to us? That's a strong yes, and we will come out and have a straight discussion with you or even do some training and help. Tools that AWS provides, but more importantly that our partners provide that help organizations get through, whether it's tools to help support your infrastructure, like web application firewalls or other things, or tools that help with the reporting, documentation, management. We have pre-built deployment capabilities. We have cloud formation templates and other things with strong guidance and references to make it easy for someone to know, hey, if I want to deploy a FedRAMP capable solution, if I use this template and these images, voila, I'm going to have a much easier time. Other pre-built artifacts, we have direct support from our team. And then really the most important thing is getting you connected with the partners in our community who know how to do this really, really well, like a stackArmor here. And then beyond that, getting visibility. One of the key things we like to do is once our customers get authorized on AWS for FedRAMP or whatever, help do a showcase and help federal customers see what solutions are out there. So if you go to the next slide, GP. The good news, it's been really successful, and again, I can't claim credit for everything here, but certainly we help. And really, the evidence of the value and the capability or the support that organizations receive from AWS and our partners in getting something like FedRAMP is clear here. Right now, if you look at the number of solutions that got their FedRAMP authorization on AWS, I think we're up to about 96 solutions running. All other cloud providers combined have, I think, 22. So it's fair to say that most organizations are choosing AWS for a variety of reasons. One, the platform is just, the capabilities and the FedRAMP authorizations we have for our own services in FedRAMP are substantial. But then also the solutions the support we provide and our partner community around that know how to do it really well on AWS is what makes this valuable. So if we go to the next slide, GP. I have some links here, and you'll all be getting the slides here. For those who want more information, we'll be around for Q&A too later. But some good information here. Probably the most important one is the bottom link there, and that's the aws.amazon.com/partners/ATO. That's where you'll find information about the ATO and AWS program. There's a form to fill out if you're interested in one. If you're someone who needs to get a FedRAMP or something else like that, or if you have a solution that you think would help others achieve a compliance requirement or meet FedRAMP requirements, we'd be happy to work with you too. That's it, GP. I'll hand over to you to talk a little bit more about the actual processes.
Cool, Dan. Thank you so much. And that was a wonderful overview of the program. And we'll definitely come back to you for seconds in terms of questions. So folks, again, thanks for joining this webinar. And this is GP with stackArmor. And we are very happy to be part of the program that Dan and his team have launched last year. And so really what I'll be doing is talking to you a little bit about how we go in and help customers on AWS reach the end goal, which is essentially a compliant end state. So we've built our business around really focusing on bringing three things together, which is the Amazon Cloud Service, compliance, and security. And so we were very happy to be one of 8 consulting partners selected by AWS as part of their inaugural launch for the ATO competency last year. And so really what I wanted to do is take a little bit of a step back and talk a little bit about the program FedRAMP, why it's important, and typically the kinds of questions that we get. Last year, we were very happy to help about 12 organizations with their ATO initiatives situated all across the country. We have customers in the Bay Area, a lot of interesting software being built there that are interested in doing business with the government, North Carolina, Florida, and all over the country, really. So really the FedRAMP program was established by the US federal government to go in and provide a consistent security standard for cloud services. And so really, if you think about the FedRAMP ATO, or the authority to operate, or as we call it, the provisional authority to operate, the idea behind it is simple. It's to go in and help an organization like a CSP or a commercial software provider to go through a security process once. And once you've done that, you're able to go in and conduct business with pretty much any federal agency, because they now can review the package and that documentation and that body of work, and you don't have to go through that whole process again and again. And this program has been tremendously successful. We have got a great speaker who will follow me, and he'll sort of give you some of the lowdown on how the program has evolved. But bottom line is the FedRAMP program is relevant for those organizations that have a cloud service that they're looking to sell into federal agencies. So the next question is, why should you bother, right? So why is FedRAMP important? And so one of the things that this shows you is we're based in Washington, DC, and we just see a huge demand as part of the IT modernization initiatives across federal agencies for cloud services. And as you saw in the previous slide that Dan showed you, there are over 90, almost 100 ATOs running on AWS and many others. As you can see, that demand for cloud services just increasing. So, depending on how you do the math, it's either a $4 billion or a $9 billion opportunity in terms of how contracts are let out and for cloud services. So again, key point is it's a multi-billion-dollar market that continues to grow, driven by a large demand for modernization of the IT infrastructure. What's also interesting is certain agencies and organizations that were slow to start off on the cloud modernization journey are starting to see acceleration. So again, if you have an innovative solution that does something differently and helps an organization save money or execute business processes faster, then you have an opportunity to go in and provide that solution to a federal agency that more than likely is looking for a solution. Again, a pretty significant market. One of the interesting things I thought that'll be relevant is just going back into Google and looking at the interest on FedRAMP searches. Two things pop out. Number one is you'll see a tremendous growth in the use of the phrase FedRAMP Marketplace or even FedRAMP. And so we've seen firsthand where the value of being listed on the FedRAMP Marketplace is not limited to just federal agencies, but we've been working with state organizations and even universities where the CIO's office or the security office, they go in and do a search on the FedRAMP Marketplace to determine whether or not you're qualified. And so again, that's increasingly becoming a go-to standard for public sector organizations. So again, there is a tremendous amount of increasing interest in FedRAMP. So again, if you're providing a cloud service and are interested in pursuing public sector customers, being on the FedRAMP Marketplace is something that you might want to consider. So the next question is, everybody talks about FedRAMP. So, what is it and how much does it cost? And so we've just provided some information here to help organizations navigate through that. And so again, the key thing to remember is it's all about the data, right? So the way the FedRAMP program works is what you're asking for the government to do if you're selling into the federal agency is to host their data in your cloud service. And so you have to go in and understand the nature of the data. And what the government does is goes through a process of basically assessing the nature of that data. And so again, there are different levels, FedRAMP high, moderate, low, or an interesting new category called LI SaaS or low impact SaaS that again have decreasing levels of security requirements based on the nature of your data. So again, if you're hosting really, really sensitive information, it's likely that the government might require a higher set of security standards that must be met. So in that particular case, you might have to go in and spend a little bit more money and time to go in and achieve that high bar. Almost 80% of IT systems tend to be at the FedRAMP moderate level. So there are fewer controls and therefore it's a little cheaper to implement because there is a little bit less work. as well as some frequencies are fewer. So there are about 325 controls in the context of a FedRAMP moderate implementation. And then it goes down. So again, you have to work with your customer, the federal agency, to go in and try and understand what kind of an ATO do you need. Again, there are great stories that'll follow after my presentation. John from Zoom Video Communications will talk about his journey and how they navigated through this process a little bit. But the key thing to keep in mind is it's very important as you're looking at the FedRAMP program to assess where you fall in these 4 categories. So let's talk a little bit about what's involved in going through a FedRAMP accreditation process. So again, just to keep things simple, there are really 4 key steps you want to watch out for. The first step is to have what we call create a compliant architecture. And so really the rule book that we use to go in and implement a compliant architecture is the NIST SP 800-53 standard. Basically, it's a set of security requirements with fairly prescriptive information that organized around what's called control families, controls, and then control objectives that help us pretty much define what we need to cover. It'll have things around, it's fairly expansive in terms of covering things like encryption, things like access control, things like incident response. So again, everything that a good system should have is captured in these requirements, and we need to make sure that our overall solution is compliant with those standards. The second thing is, once you've developed the technically compliant architecture, you have to go in and demonstrate that you are compliant. So yes, there is documentation involved, and so you need to be able to go in and show things like plans, policies, procedures, as well as evidentiary information, right? So again, the government is trusting you with their data, and so given their nature of their mission, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have the ability to go in and meet the responsibility associated with that activity. The third thing then is, and this is where a lot of organizations fall short, is to have well-written procedures. The program is difficult sometimes for a lot of organizations that are used to maybe different kinds of compliance requirements that are not as prescriptive or as well-written as the FedRAMP program based on the NIST protocols. But again, you do need to go in and demonstrate a fairly well-written set of documentation that helps you go in and demonstrate and execute on key system hygiene and operation parameters. And then finally, you have to go in and hire a third-party assessor or an independent organization to basically test everything that you've talked about, and it's a fairly well-documented process. There's tons of documentation on this, and for those of you that are interested in learning more, please send us an email or reach out to some of our folks, and we'll be happy to point you there. But that's definitely something that the FedRAMP Program Management Office cares a lot about, is making sure they're providing good information and helpful information as much as they can. So once we know what we need to do, we now need to talk a little bit about what's sort of the typical journey. And so again, in order to keep things simple for this presentation, there are really 3 things you want to care about. One is what we call the preparation phase. In industry, when you engage with people, sometimes people call this the advisory phase as well. But the bottom line is you're basically in preparation where you're going through the things that we talked about earlier. I'm creating the architecture, I'm putting together my documentation, I'm doing my penetration testing, I'm just getting ready for the next stage, which is the assessment phase, which has to be then conducted by an independent third party. Again, there are very, very specific orchestrated documents that need to be prepared, very specific activities that need to be prepared. Again, the FedRAMP PMO provides great information on these activities. So none of this is undocumented or unknown. And then finally, once you've created all of the documentation and it has been tested by this independent third party, a recommendation is made to the FedRAMP PMO to go in and proceed with the next step, which is the authorization phase. So again, keep in mind 3 broad phases. Generally in industry, a lot of times when you talk to people, the first one, they'll call it an advisory engagement or an advisory phase, but it's really to help you prepare. So some of the challenges that we commonly observe as we help customers do this, pursue this kind of an engagement, these are some of the top 4 things that we observe. So again, if you're in the market and you're looking to go in and prepare for pursuing a FedRAMP accreditation, these are some tidbits that you want to go in and start poking at and making sure that you line up. So again, documentation tends to be a weak area. A lot of organizations feel that they have gone through an ISO audit or a SOC 2 audit and that should be enough. Again, that's normally not the case because again, FedRAMP is a fairly prescriptive program, unlike any other program that you might have seen before. And so it's important to pay attention to what their requirements are. Also, the technical architecture is important. So again, given the nature of cybersecurity and the threats, there is a lot of focus on this part of the solution. So if the NIST requirement requires something, then it's important to make sure that your solution complies with it. Things like multi-factor, things like encryption, as I mentioned. So again, all of those things are important and you must go in and make sure that your solution has the ability to respond to those requirements. Finally, one big area that's obviously coming up is FIPS 140-2 validated crypto modules, again, across the stack, inside and outside. So again, we encourage customers to take a look at that. And then finally, this is a big one, is you want to pick up the right region, right? As Dan alluded to, just picking the right AWS region and saying, oh, you're magically compliant doesn't work. You have responsibilities. And so Amazon has put in a lot of time and effort in making available different flavors of regions. And so it's important for the customer to understand where their right destination should be. So again, it's a little bit of a business come technical come market research based exercise. So again, if you do a good job in taking care of these issues, you're likely to fly through this process a little bit smoother than without it. So real quickly, stackArmor. We have been doing this for a while, and so we have developed a solution called stackArmor Threat Alert, which is part of the ATO and AWS partner program. And really what we do is we do three things, right? Our goal is to go and provide you with a pre-built security system that we call the Cloud GSS that runs within your account. We go in and provide pre-written documentation, which is filled based on the security controls that we've implemented. And it also goes in and includes what we call a tech stack to go in and help accelerate this process of going through the ATO. So this is a quick example of what a landing zone looks like. So again, since we've done this for so long, Dan talked about CloudFormation templates. So we go and run this in your account. We provide you with all of those security compliance controls in one single box that are then consumed by your application to help accelerate your ability to gain. So one of the interesting things this slide shares with you is how we go in and deliver the acceleration. So I won't go through this slide, but the key part is we've done a lot of the preparatory work of going through, let's say, a FedRAMP moderate baseline of 325 controls. And so what this shows is that we are able to go in and provide almost 150 plus, nearly over 150 plus controls that are already compliant. And so therefore now you, the customer, just has to worry about just a fewer, many controls that are not off your plate at this or off your plate at this point. And so the interesting thing there also is obviously Amazon provides not just a lot of the controls because of the infrastructure they're providing. And so I think one of the critical pieces that a lot of people miss is Amazon provides a lot of the tools that enable the acceleration to meet the compliance standards. So, there are lots of services around continuous monitoring, CloudTrail, Guard Duty, things like that. So it's not just, the infrastructure that AWS provides, but it's also a lot of the tooling that helps accelerate the compliance process. So again, the key part is we want to help our customers reduce the time and cost of getting through this compliant end state. So again, we've been working closely with the AWS team. And so we have created an offer for SaaS companies and startups to go in and help them with some of their initial assessments if they're interested in pursuing a FedRAMP ATO. And so with that, I want to thank you for being as part of this broadcast. And it gives me great pleasure to invite our next speaker, John Keese from Zoom Video Communications, who recently went through a FedRAMP journey. And of course, John is a veteran of the FedRAMP program. And I will hand this over to John to take it away.
Thanks, GP, and thanks, Dan. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar, and certainly grateful for using the Zoom platform to do so. So GP, first slide is just talk a little bit about who I am. Next slide is, and as I look at the attendee list, there's some folks on this call that I can't hear from directly, but I'm sure I'll hear from them after, that were part of this journey. So the little bit of the background on myself, I ran a company called Autonomic Resources, and in fact, we were the first cloud service provider to achieve FedRAMP and DoD adjudication in that program. So that was done back in 2012, and arguably there wasn't the support fabric that currently exists today, either from AWS or firms like stackArmor, right? In all the 3PO environments. So quite literally, I remember my team, we actually built some of our first computer cabinets in our office, and we actually had those shipped out to co-locations, right? And that's kind of tells you where it started. This is back in 2012. The good thing about that, and what one of the gentlemen I think is in the audience, is that ARC-P platform, albeit we always touted it was first, we had to compete with the likes of Amazon and Microsoft at that time. And I always remember a story where the gentleman that ran security at Autonomic, we were sitting at a table up at the FedRAMP office across from Amazon and Microsoft and Google, et cetera. And we came out of the meeting, and his name was James. He said, "What the hell are we doing here?" And I said, "Well, we earned our spot doing this. We earned our spot at the table." So just to kind of give you some background, the history here for FedRAMP for me has gone back right from the beginning, and I had a lot of great people that supported me in that process. So that company was sold, and now it's the basis of the Milk Cloud 2.0 platform that exists today. So a little bit of a legacy left behind, and there's still some good people that operate in that environment, helping DISA in that regard. But to fast forward, I joined Zoom a couple years back, and the first a prerogative or the first priority was to get through FedRAMP moderate adjudication. And I believe a big component of our speed to do that, which took us, we started in July, and we were actually done with our 3PO work in November. So that's about 4 months. That was a new build all within AWS GovCloud. And the acceleration certainly was because of great cloud service providers like Amazon, and that's the platform that Zoom uses. That really accelerated our process with the FedRAMP. And our sponsor, which was DHS. So just want to kind of from building cabinets in our own office in North Carolina to now being able to adjudicate software as a service platform in 4 months should tell you that the support fabric out there for companies that may be in this audience is grown substantially, and you should take advantage of that. So through the GP had asked me, like, can you give the audience some idea of what worked and what didn't work through the, I guess, 8 years plus that I've been involved with federal cloud computing. So what worked certainly was through the years, our use of automation has grown substantially. So is the cloud service providers' tool sets that allow you to plug into their automation tools. So we have a great inheritance in our web tiers in Amazon to use a quadri of the Amazon GovCloud services. And we always wait for the next one that they're going to put in GovCloud. For instance, we're waiting for EKS because now we're starting to use containerized technology inside the environment, right? And it's supposed to happen momentarily or within the quarter. But the automation that is there has helped accelerate all the functional and operational duties that a cloud service provider needs to perform, because it's just getting your accreditation. That's just the start. You have to run this environment under continuous compliance every day after you're adjudicated. So that work never stops, but the amount of automation is definitely increasing year over year. And we're really happy about the partners that are out there to help companies like Zoom to be able to really take our automation further. Additional to automation, in the engagement at Zoom, we brought in a lot of automation from partners that allowed us to do asset management and to do automated POAM management and to do vulnerability management and to age those vulnerabilities, so that our POAMs on a month-to-month basis that go out to our AO at authorizing official at DHS, they're clean, and we can mark our deviations, we can artifact in that. So automation has been a big one. Control inheritance is also extremely important for us. If somebody else has done the work that we can leverage from their certifications, we want to leverage that from a control standpoint. And GP mentioned the inheritance and controls that his firm and firms like AWS bring to a cloud service provider. Those are significant and make the journey to getting FedRAMP much cleaner, much quicker, and a better ROI. And I saw a question that I think that will answer. One of the gentlemen, Sam, had asked, like, how much does it cost? So it can vary, and I guess we'll get to that later, but I definitely have some opinions on cost. Second thing is not necessarily understanding who all is in the audience. Let me say that if you're an emerging cloud service provider, if you're out of the Bay Area, if you're out of somewhere else, and federal is on your map, right, and you might be venture funded or you might be organically funded, et cetera, trust me that it's not just the big companies that can go through FedRAMP. It's the small companies as well, because of the amount of support services that are out there now for such firms to do that. We had to build everything ourselves in the beginning. Now there's a lot more menu-oriented or convenience technologies out there to help you go through the process to mitigate your cost of achieving that FedRAMP authorization. In fact, I would argue that the bigger that you are, obviously, the more it costs, but it's not impossible for small and mid-sized companies to really look at the federal market, look at FedRAMP, and understand that they can actually get there and do it cost effectively. So further to that is having worked with the PMO on and off for several years. In the last engagement, certainly one of the things I took away is, like, really need to have your security boundary nailed down when you start the process, or at least early on in your process. And what do I mean by security boundary is what's contained within that FedRAMP boundary. How are you protecting the edge? How are you, what is your encryption within the boundary? What is your encryption coming into the boundary? Understanding all of your component services that need to ingress and egress outside that security boundary. What data are you sharing outside of that security boundary with other cloud service providers or other areas or other systems that don't exist within that security boundary? Delineating that, indicating what that data is, especially data that might be customer sensitive or cloud security sensitive. You really need to identify and inventory those early on. That really helps you not only on the front end of getting accreditation, but also as you add services and features, you always start with what's our security boundary? How is it changing? What data is ingressing and egressing? What's the encryption for the ingress and egress, and where is it going? And being able to document that so that when you eventually get to a point where you're discussing with your authorizing official a significant change request, you can come fully prepared to say, we're adding this feature, it's not affecting, or we've mitigated the effect of the security on the overall boundary, and we know exactly what's moving in and out of that boundary. Okay, fifth is I would say that the advisory services that are out there, there's plenty of good advisory services out there. A lot of the 3POs do both audit and advisory, but don't place a miracle expectation on advisory services. They'll usually come in, oh my gosh, they'll usually come in and you'll kind of give you a kind of a standard SSP, a set of policies, et cetera, but they drop that off, they do a gap analysis, and then the CSP says, well, how come we're not advancing in our FedRAMP journey? It's too much reliance on those advisory services as they exist today. Okay, and then GP, based on time, I'm gonna have you flip to the next slide. Okay, what didn't work? Well, lack of automation, right? Having to carry inventory, carry vulnerabilities, carry things of that in, Office products, Microsoft Office, Excel, Word, et cetera. And those are very arduous to keep track of, especially within very large environments. So you really need to focus on, automation. But the lack of automation, that will definitely hurt your journey into accreditation. Again, having support security boundary understanding. These are like the converse of what did work. The converse is, too much dependence on advisory services, et cetera. Okay, next slide. One more. Okay, so questions when you're picking your platform, in where you're going to build from, because the infrastructure as a service wars they're done, right? The predominance of Amazon and Microsoft and Google, et cetera, those are, the IaaS wars are over. So now everybody's focused on software as a service or platform as a service. So when you're picking your platform to build on, make sure to look at their success. I think Dan had pointed out the number of authorizations that occurred on AWS versus every other platform, right? That means something. There's something to be said there. And when you talk to your customers about where what platform you're housed off of, if you could say that we use this service provider, this cloud platform provider, and the customer says, oh yeah, we use them too, no problem. That just makes a lot of the, especially in the federal space where, they're wondering where are you coming off of? Where are you being served off of? And then does that cloud service provider have access to you eventually when you go to the DoD market and you're going to find a necessity to connect to the NIPRNet? You want to have a cloud service provider that can work with you in terms of being able to get to the BCAPs or the boundary cloud access points that allow you to connect to the NIPRNet. You need a mission sponsor, but they have conduit to do that. So that's really important when you plan ahead. You might not think you're ever going to get into DoD, but you will. So next slide. Okay. So from a couple of comments, and again, I think if you're starting this journey, the first thing that people are taught to do is go talk to a 3PO that does advisory services. I would say now with folks like Amazon, folks like GP's organization, I think in my opinion, you have better luck at working with them than you will with just spending a lot of money on advisory services that ultimately in a lot of cases fail, right? Ultimately, you do need a 3PO. You need a good 3PO. We've worked with one for several years. We like them. They're a partner, and they work with us. But the advisory services, I caution to just have too much dependent on those. What do they typically do? They'll give you a notional SSP. They'll give you notional policies and gap. But remember that you're going to have to write and delineate that SSP. You're going to have to delineate your policies. You're going to have to determine what your gaps are. Nobody can do that for you, but you can work with partners who've been through this before to say, we can help with the gap. We can help provide the SIEM tools. We can configure those SIEM tools. We can help you with alerting. We can help you with FIM tool integration. We can help you with vulnerability management tools. Those are the type of firms that will progress your journey much quicker than the traditional routes that have been done in the past. So if you do use advisories, use it on a T&M basis. That's my suggestion. Next slide. Okay. 3POs to consider. Who's done the most packages? Who's been involved with most of the accreditation? There's top three. It's Coalfire, it's Shellman, it's Kratos, but there's others. But you know, when you're picking your 3PO, your best bet is to go around them. They all cost about the same in terms of what they're going to charge you for that service. And the better prepared you are, you know, the price not might change a lot, but it'll be a lot easier if you get through the process. Remember that FedRAMP is hard for a reason. And you know, we used to hear about complainers, and they're usually big companies that says it's too hard, you're making it too hard. It's really not hard. Follow the rules, implement your technologies, work with good partners, you'll make it through the FedRAMP process. So next slide. Okay, just a couple of points. Although we talk about FedRAMP, I want to suggest that FedRAMP is, we consider it at Zoom, that's our gold standard in terms of security and baseline operations. We're implementing all the good processes from FedRAMP into our commercial environment, which doesn't need a FedRAMP accreditation because we have a separate instance for Zoom for government. But those controls pushed into your commercial will help you with your SOC 2 audits. It will help you with your ISO 27000 audits. It'll help you with your HIPAA controls. It'll help. It is basically the watermark that raises all boats. If you do FedRAMP, it doesn't mean it's just the goodness of FedRAMP isn't just for federal business. It will definitely help you on your commercial side, especially when you deal with large enterprise customers who are very sophisticated in their compliance processes and will audit you just as hard as a 3PO related to your commercial offerings. So the more that you can envelop and take those good things that are, you know, like stackArmor does or Amazon does, it's not just for FedRAMP. It really crosses all your segments so that you essentially comply with one standard, but it really pushes down to your other standards, and it helps you have cleaner SOC 2s. It helps you have less exceptions in those SOC 2s, if any. And a lot of people look at FedRAMP and think it's just related to federal business, but if you're in trying to convince your management or your execs to say, you know, that's just for federal, it definitely has a side where it will benefit your commercial business, especially as you start to get the more sophisticated customer base. I think that's the fastest 15 minutes I've ever had in my life, but I'll stop there. In this, slides will be shared, so I won't spend it. I want to make sure that we leave time, GP, for Q&A. Yeah,
of course, John. Again, you've been great with time. I don't want to cut you off, so okay. You know, I would like you to, you know, complete it. Okay, so I think your session was just absolutely fabulous, and you know, thank you so much for basically going in and, you know, sort of providing this wealth of information. And so what I will do now is turn it over to our moderator, Amreen, to go through some questions. But before she does that, I wanted to again highlight some of the things, John, that you covered, and Dan, that you covered, just in terms of quick summary. Again, you know, pursuing the FedRAMP accreditation is a lot about method and planning. And, you know, as you talked about, John, you touched on executive sponsorships. Definitely, it's not just like, you know, hiring a consultant to do SOC 2 audits and things like that. Nothing against those programs, but it's just a different, you know, animal, if you will. So, Amreen, over to you.
Thank you so much, GP, Dan, and John, for sharing such helpful information. I also want to thank all our attendees for your interest in this topic. We will also be launching a poll shortly, so you should see 2 questions pop up on your screen shortly. We will be looking forward to your responses, so thank you for that. Now, quickly jumping on to the questions. So the first question that I have for the panelists is, what size security or compliance teams do you need to begin considering your FedRAMP journey?
Amreen, I think, John, you're the man in the hot seat for this. So
yeah,
I think
sure.
it's for you.
Amreen, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, what size of security or compliance teams would you need to begin your FedRAMP journey?
Okay. Quick and dirty on this. You need at least 2 dedicated compliance personnel. You need 2 people dedicated out of your operations group. You need 2 people dedicated to your security group, and a representative from your engineering if you're doing code development. I would say that those people need to be dedicated and given free latitude to do the work without interruption of their daily lives. The compliance should be delivering the message about how what controls need to be implemented. The operation and engineering and security people have to determine how they implement that, and then the compliance team tests that that meets the watermark that's required. So I think, in my opinion, it would be about 7 dedicated people to start with, without understanding the size of the organization from that standpoint.
Yep. Thanks, John. I think I agree with you. Definitely you guys have a pretty significant operation. So
Yes.
What we've seen is, again, with some startups. So we have a startup right now that's based in the Bay Area. They have a really exciting solution that helps organizations in a medical setting, helps people go in and detect sleep disorders. And so they have a slightly smaller team of about 3 or 4 people. But, again, the continuum is somewhere in that order. And of course, John, you operate at scale. Some other people might operate at a smaller size, but I think the team sizes are in the continuum that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So
I think the extension of that, though, GP, is who are your valued vendor partners that can help you along that way, right? We have a go-to in our organization that helps us with a lot of our compliance related issues in terms of the automation. So those are really important partners, and they're an extension of your FTEs.
You're absolutely right. So there are absolutely ways to go in and involve that. Amreen, do we have any other questions? Because if not, then I'd like to go in and ask Dan and John also a few questions.
Yeah, so I think for the other questions that we have, if attendees can send us an email at solutions@stackarmor.com. So we would be happy to help since we are at time. So GP, I will hand it over to you for your questions to Dan and John.
Great. So Dan, I know you have been a big advocate of this ATO on AWS program and driving it. So I just wanted to have you maybe chime in and talk a little bit about your focus areas for 2020, and what are some of the target, I guess, markets you're thinking of, or target initiatives, or either startups or segments. So would love to sort of see into your crystal ball for 2020.
Yeah, and thanks, GP. And I think John mentioned it earlier in that historically the organizations that have been seeking FedRAMP have been on the larger side because it's always, when there's been a perception and a reality that that it's been too expensive and too time consuming for small organizations. So one of the things that we're really trying to focus on this year is how do we bring it and how do we work with our partners to create frameworks and reusable tools, processes, and managed platforms so that we can reach much smaller organizations, from startups to small and mid-sized software companies that wouldn't have otherwise thought to pursue a FedRAMP. So for us, that's probably our biggest push this year, is coming up with resources to do that and coming up with the right program to help them get it quickly. And then beyond that, extending to other frameworks as well. Obviously, defense frameworks, there's some consistency there with IL4 and IL5 and some reciprocity between FedRAMP 2. So making sure that organizations that are pursuing FedRAMP also have the opportunity to get into those spaces where it makes sense. But really, I think the biggest thing is that how do we move down the curve a little bit and help broaden the number of solutions that are getting FedRAMP?
Thank you for that, Dan. John, since we are running out of time, the last question is yours, so that you'll have the last word.
Okay.
So obviously, you've been through this multiple times, and
yes.
So you've obviously successfully gone through the accreditation in record time with Zoom video. So I guess for folks that are in the SaaS space and selling software as a service to different kinds of customers, I know it's a little early, but have you seen any kind of positive effects from going through the FedRAMP process in terms of even being able to pursue other kinds of work other than just strictly federal? I mean, are you seeing some sort of a business benefit of having gone through this, really stringent security and accreditation process? In other words, are you able to, for example, comply with other standards faster? So just very curious to see if you see greater validation for your services in the marketplace as a result of going through FedRAMP.
Well, yeah, I try to allude to that in the closing minutes of my presentation, but yes. So FedRAMP isn't, it's not rocket science, right? It's difficult, and it's supposed to be, but it's based on NIST 853, FIPS 199 principles, right? Those controls map directly and sometimes indirectly to your SOC 2 and your ISO controls, right? Now there's differences in that. SOC 2 is getting more sophisticated. That opens up the market. FedRAMP is just, I would call it, if you achieve FedRAMP and you apply that same rigor into your other areas that are not government oriented, I think that your ability to talk credibly to large enterprises, financials, healthcare, utilities, et cetera, you come with a lot of credibility knowing that your team and the organization has arguably went through one of the more difficult, more challenging accreditation processes, and that pays dividends on the other side. It builds everybody's confidence inside your operations groups, your engineering groups, your security groups, that they've actually been participating and have that experience to actually run cloud services to a better standard.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. It's exciting to see you continuing on that journey and reaping the benefits of this.
Yeah, I'll be dead soon.
Journey.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you,
John and Dan. Again, thank you so much for being on this broadcast with us. We are looking forward to having you for many more such events. And Indy, I will ask you to wrap it up and maybe terminate the session.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all for attending the webinar. We hope you found it useful. We hope you enjoyed the event. A follow-up email will be sent to all the attendees tomorrow. Feel free to get in touch with us at solutions@stackarmor.com for any questions. Thank you again, and have a great day ahead.